Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Baka 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 podcast.
Baka!
Baka.
It's amazing how every time you open your mouth, you prove you're an idiot.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Baka Baka Baka. This is an anime podcast that I rarely wear pants to. Also, every 2 weeks we watch an anime and we come together to talk about it like a book club. And we hope that you follow along and you can talk about it because we're going to get into some spoilers. And we watched what I think is a really good anime this week. But before we get into it, let me introduce the co-hosts that pretty much make this show worth listening to. First off, we have the hunter to my Tony the Tiger, Jeremy. How you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty good. I have been playing with the XCOM 2 dev kit, and holy crap, I think I've managed to cram over 270 mods into 5 mod packages. Totally not releasing them because they're probably so full of bugs and incompatibilities, but it's working.
Is that why I see you launch XCOM like every 10 minutes?
Yeah. Yeah, that's me trying to debug it, figure out what's not meshing very well. So it's been a blast. Someday I'll play it.
That sounds fun and nerdy beyond anything I'm capable of. We also have the Helsing to my Count Chocula, Jason. What are you up to?
I've been meeting my goals with Path of Exile. I've been playing this stupid game for... it's not stupid, it's amazing. I actually sent you guys a funny Reddit post of the two packs.
That comic was
Petty Arcade guys.
Petty Arcade guys.
And they're like, so Path of Exile is pretty great. And it's free, so free. How much have you spent on it? $8,000.
Yeah, it even got money out of me.
Yeah, me too.
Boy.
But yeah, actually, I ended up throwing another $10 at it. So yeah, it's been pretty great.
So I got to ask before we get to me, did you guys get the name references today?
I got the Tony Tiger one and the Count Chocula one.
They're serial killers.
And cereal box characters.
Who's Hunter?
A hunter to Tony the Tiger, like a guy who hunts a tiger. He's a serial killer.
Oh.
And Helsing to Count Chocula
would kill the vampire.
Okay, for all those who just crashed their car because they're so busy applauding me.
Or they can't take it anymore.
They're crashing and just put an end to it all.
I thought of that one today before we recorded. I was so gleeful about it.
I got it. I just didn't think it was like great.
Oh, you're wrong, but that's okay.
Over my head, so good job.
So last time we did a major episode, I said I was not watching the Death Note film, and I did watch the Death Note film on Netflix.
And?
You loved it.
The worst thing they did was attach the name Death Note to it, especially the characters Light Yagami and L, because they do not live up to the bar set by the anime for those characters and that story. But it's still on its own. If it was just a story about some punk kid who finds a notebook you can kill people with by writing a name in, it's not that bad. But knowing who Light Yagami is in the anime and how sadistic and genius he was with his machinations, and then having this guy having 80s ballads playing while he doesn't know what's happening to him. It's hard to watch it and be like, oh man, if the real anime characters were here, you'd be dead in like 5 seconds. You would not last.
That's funny.
But I actually kind of wish they'd done it as like a sequel. Like, hey, what if Ryuk dropped a notebook in Seattle after he was done with Japan? And some different guy found it. I think there's a good movie there. So I guess final answer, it's not as bad as everyone wanted it to be, and it's not as good as anime lovers wanted it to be. Somewhere in between.
Pretty consistent with a lot of anime movies.
Speaking of anime,
we watched one. We watched Erased, also known as Boku Dake ga Inai Machi, also known as The Town Without Me, which I kind of like as a name better after having watched it. It was written by Taka Kishimoto, directed by Tomi Shoko. Shiko? I can't read my own writing. Ito. This director did Sword Art Online 2, for those who like the gun battle arc. And the studio is A1 Pictures, who did Occultic 9, Sword Art Online, and Fairy Tail. So they've got some stuff under the belt and stuff we watched. We watched, like I said, Erased, and we need to talk about our pre-spoiler reviews before we get into heavy spoilers. And just so you know, there's like mystery in this one, and we're probably going to be spoiling it really fast, so do not even dip your toes in past the spoiler point if you haven't watched this, and you should. But let's do pre-reviews, guys.
But as a preface, as you and I talked about, Troy, this is a really tough one to sell verbally. You need to trust us and just go watch this one.
Right.
So
if someone asks you what the concept is, you are either going to ramble forever or just sound horrid. Child abuse and serial killer?
I think there is a pretty nice way to do it. It's like reverse ReZero, right? He resets because other people die.
But sell it to a non-anime watcher.
Right. Well, what else happens in it? Yeah, no, let's not get into that. Let's
All right, so Jason, give us your non-spoiler review.
I really, really enjoyed it, and this was my second time watching it. I didn't watch it all the way through because it's been pretty recent since I watched it. It's very concise story. They don't do too much fluff, and from the point of angle that they shot the film from, I really, really appreciate it. That's why Satoru is my favorite character. And also the closure. This anime did exactly what I want most anime to do. Just give me a really solid story with some nice closure at the end.
Oh, nice. Jeremy, how about you?
I loved it. It's good anime. I think you should definitely watch it. And I won't say anything else.
For me, all I want to say is this was the breath of fresh air from all the tropey stuff we've watched lately that I needed so badly. I don't think there's a single moment of fan service in this. It was so nice. And like Jason hit it on, the story is clear and concise. There's a convoluted setup, sure, and it's hard to sell, but really this is a very simple, self-contained story that was very enjoyable as a parent. A lot of emotions I felt while watching it.
It's right there with you.
Yeah. So I would highly recommend. I think this is a good anime to show to non-anime watchers, I think, because it's not, other than the twist of the time travel, there's not a whole lot of robots and powers and stuff that people need to worry about that turns off non-anime watchers. This is, like I said, just a really good thriller story.
Yeah, it even handles its what power it does have. It handles extremely subtly.
Right. I loved how they didn't explain it because let's not get into the rules and convoluted, because that's not what the story is about. The story is about this town preyed on by a serial killer, and really like the way they did that. So, guys, for the opening theme, this is in my top 5 of the year. I love the opening song, Riri. I think that's how you say it. Regarding. I don't know how to say it. The English version that Nate wants to battle do, I love listening to. It was already in my playlist before we even watched this anime, and then seeing the visuals of the opening to go along with the song only enhanced it. The ending, I actually skipped most of the times. It didn't catch me. What did you guys think?
In your boat, I really, I don't have it in a playlist, but the visuals are spot on, and they make it gives you that feeling of this is going to be another good episode kind of feel.
Yeah, I can agree. I'm not one to build playlists very often, but I let this play several of the episodes on the intro, which is very rare.
I don't know if anyone caught it on episode 11, the very opening sequence. So normally you have Satoru come in and sit down in the theater.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't sit down in the theater.
I did catch that.
Wasn't even there.
I missed that, but I did catch on the final episode all the eyes are uncrossed.
Yeah.
Through the whole thing, the eyes have black
Didn't catch
lines
that.
scribbled through them, and in the final episode, the black lines are gone, and you can see everyone's full face.
Oh, that's cool.
There's actually a lot of cool, subtle things that we'll get into when we get into the other stuff. Narrator voice changes in certain episodes. It's lots of cool details.
Well done.
So because we're dying to get into this, guys, spoiler warning. And like I said, we're probably going to blow the mystery pretty early. So you really should go watch this, even if you're not a huge anime fan and for some reason you just like listening to us. This is a great anime. But from here on out, all bets are off. So you've been warned, and here we go. We start off meeting a young man. He's 29 years old. Is that right?
Yeah.
Is that a 4 or a 9 I drew?
It's a 9. 29.
I was eating while I wrote. Sorry.
Is there food on your notes too?
That's what I was thinking.
Sometimes there are. Guys, I have a busy schedule. He is a struggling manga artist. He is a pizza delivery boy. And we find out pretty fast that he has a weird special power that when something horrific happens around him, he will go back in time a few minutes and then has a chance to prevent it from happening usually. So like we see a very good example of him driving his motorcycle. He goes backwards in time. He's like, okay, what did I miss? What's weird in the scene that I missed? And he spots a truck driver who's asleep at the wheel, has to drive over and try to get the truck over, and he ends up in an accident. But this is our main character, Satoru.
Truck driver actually had a heart attack. He died.
Did he?
Yeah, he was dead.
I thought he was just asleep at the wheel. I'm sorry.
I did when I saw him, and then later they went on about it, and I'm like, oh.
That's why you didn't wake up from him pounding on the window.
Yeah.
I guess that makes sense. I just thought he was having a really good dream.
He was drooling.
Guys, what do you think of Satoru?
He's my favorite character. And I think a lot of it doesn't have to do so much with him personally, because he's pretty run of the mill as far as protagonist heroes go, that don't have super strength or super speed. But the angle that the story is told from, and it's nice, like you said, there's just no tropes with this anime. It's very much decision-making process that you could feel yourself stepping into this person's shoes and making the exact same decisions.
Yeah, I think he was one of the most interesting characters I've ever seen, because you get him from two angles. You see him as the adult, 29 years old, and then you see him later when he's a kid, and yet he's still 29.
Right.
Yeah, and so even he makes comments several times when he's dealing with situations where, as a kid, his hormones and things like that are kicking in, and he's having the responses that a child would have in those situations. Like, oh, wow, she's pretty, to a classmate. He's behaving like a little kid sometimes, but you hear this narration of his adult voice in the background that is trying to almost get control or counsel himself and be like, come on, wait a minute, who am I? Because he's constantly trying to struggle with that and figure out what his identity is. And how they play with this and how this shifts around throughout this entire series, I think is one of the most fascinating character expositions that I've ever seen. So he was really interesting from start to finish. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure we'll get into some of his interesting quirks as we go, but yeah, he's a really good character.
Very enjoyable.
I had some trouble attaching to him in the first episode. And I think the reason is because he's more complex than I'm used to, that I wasn't quite understanding him or figuring him out. Once we get back to 1988 and he becomes 10-year-old himself, I latched on immediately. And then even once he becomes adult again, I was still hooked on him. He's a great character. What Jeremy was talking about, I really like the idea of, if you're a man in a child's body, how much is your child self and how much is your adult self? Mm-hmm. How much of being a child is what your body is going through, and how much is just what you have in your brain, and those two wills battling was an interesting thing to watch.
Two things I wanted to mention too is I know they were in 6th grade. I don't know what that equates to, but I was kind of picturing them as around 12.
They're 11.
11. Oh, okay.
And because Kaio is 10 and it's her 11th birthday that they're trying to get to.
That's what it was. Good point. And the other thing was at the beginning in this first episode and even a little bit into it, I didn't realize it until much later. But I think the reason why he was so hard to attach to right away was because we were watching a broken man. Yeah. And so later, as we start to see him solve the problems that broke him initially, he becomes so much more of a likable character. I really like that about him. Yeah.
Yeah. That actually,
you don't know what to get attached to because he's not whole.
Right.
He's got the hole in his heart. Right. Yeah.
This character, after the accident, we find out his mom has come to stay with him. My favorite character. Gosh, I love a super mom, and this lady is a super mom. She's there, and he's like, "Oh, you're just here for the tourism." She's like, "No, I'm not. By the way, do the trains run together?" But this mom character is kind of like the perfect super mom. She lets her child, because we see a lot of her when she's raising the 11-year-old version, and she's trusting in him and letting him find his own way, but at the same time she's constantly keeping an eye on it. She's aware of what he's going through for the most part. You could say maybe a little letting him too much go through some of the things. But I really enjoyed this mother, and I loved every time he called her a demon.
Yeah. I actually had to go and look up what he meant by yokai, and they weren't always bad. The yokai were sometimes good spirits. You could actually change a evil yokai into a good one. And
I know yokai from Yokai Watch, and their spirits that just mess with humans.
Okay. It was new to me. So I actually, the first time I saw her, I thought, what lips? What is going on here? Because the way they drew her lips was so
pouty.
Yeah, like constantly pouting, and she's 50. And I'm like, and of course that's why he's calling her yokais, because she never ages, and which I think is just a really funny statement about how, the old statement that's always made that Asian women keep looking really pretty for a really, really long time. And so she was an interesting character to me, but I really didn't like her at the beginning because she came off almost as a mom that showed up because she had to, but she wasn't really there to pay attention to him. And it was a totally incorrect perception, but it's the perception I got, I think, because of the way that they arranged his relationship with her. It was almost like I was seeing her through his eyes.
That makes sense. Because that's kind of what you're given in this first episode is she. I mean, even at first, I wasn't sure if she was the mom. There's just this lady cooking in his apartment. And he's like, "Oh, you're here."
Yeah. Like, wow. Okay, so he doesn't have a good relationship with his mom. I wonder what she did. Plus, I was wondering, this broken guy, what happened in his youth that broke him, and how much of it is she responsible for? So I was immediately set up to think, well, maybe the mom is not such a good person.
Jason, what do you think?
It's interesting.
I really liked this character. And I think you're right about the supermom part, because not only is she kind of a badass as far as the things she stands up for, and later on we find out she does something for him for 15 years.
Oh, jeez.
That's like, but to find out also she's a single mom, or at least when she was raising Satoru, that she was a single mom, and she would cook these amazing meals every night. And plus hold down a job, plus take care of his needs, plus make sure that she knew what he was doing. In this first episode, I didn't quite know how to attach to her, but throughout the anime, I really enjoyed this character.
My only complaint at the start of this, because we find out she kind of gets involved back in this mystery that happened back in 1988 based on something they witnessed together, a child abduction, actually. And I was like, why would she be so aware of what's going on that she is solving this mystery? And then we don't find out till like way later that she was an investigative reporter.
Yeah.
and it was like, oh, okay, there that the puzzle piece I needed to understand why she's calling around about child abductions and solving this mystery. Then that was good. But other than that, yeah, I absolutely love this character. We had one other character we meet who, the mom, whose name is Sachiko, by the way, but I'll call her mom the whole time.
Yeah, she's mom to me forever.
She also dies.
Yeah,
that's about to happen.
That was sad.
There's a co-worker of Satoru who delivers pizza with him, and she's a high school girl named Airi. Airi. Sure.
Airi.
Katagiri.
Because that's easier.
Yeah.
You said that wrong. It is good.
Look, we'll just say Bahama get home with it. Like I said, she's this pizza delivery girl, and she's his friend, which is kind of an age difference. But the mom invites her over, like, yeah, I'm gonna do some matchmaking here. But this character actually becomes very important to the story, especially to the 29-year-old version of Satoru. Jeremy, what did you think of her?
So at first I kind of wondered why they incorporated Airi, like what was her purpose? They immediately mentioned that she was 17 and that he really didn't have an interest in her, and that she kept behaving strangely toward him, almost flirtatiously. Well, definitely flirtatiously, making comments, and he would find ways to shrug them off. And so I wondered where they were going with her. In the end, though, I really liked the character that developed. She's got her own baggage, which we're not really privy to in its entirety, but we're given enough information to understand that she's got this need to trust someone, and she's decided to put that trust on him because he walks around like a injured puppy, and so she's drawn to that. And so she's an interesting character. I think she's rings a little bit hollow for me. Of all the characters in this cast, she's probably the weakest point. But I still enjoyed, once it got going, her presence.
I was going to say that she's the closest thing there is to a trope in this anime, because she's kind of that anime girl who's all good and believes in the boy and kind of likes him just because he's there and he's a main character. And so there's that line. But she is more complex than that. We just don't get to see that for a very long time. But she's also not that much more complex than that. Jason, what did you think?
Mirrored exactly what you were saying. She's... yeah, that's about it.
Okay. I mean, that wraps it up so succinctly.
Yeah. She didn't get a ton of airtime, but I did like how big of a heart she had, especially when it came to Satoru and trusting him even when things were not looking in his favor. But besides that, I mean, we don't get to see her a lot in this anime. So
she does serve a very important purpose, because in the end, when he's making his final decisions and final sacrifices, she is one of the things he's sacrificing. He's losing her in his life, and you can get her. It definitely becomes apparent that he wants her in his life.
Mm-hmm.
Like we had mentioned, mom and him witness a almost child kidnapping. And this gets her thinking about the child kidnappings that happened back in their town back in 1988. And she is able to identify this kidnapper and realize it's the same one. And she makes some calls to an old journalist buddy. But before she can go too far with it, the killer ends up following her and killing her. And then when Satoru comes home and finds the body, in probably my least favorite scene of this whole thing is that he immediately gets blamed for it.
It was very predictable.
You're right. Like, just call for help. And, of course he's going to find the dead body. It's his house. Like, come on. But of course he panics and flees from the cops. And so things are going bad for him. But then the time travel, which he calls revival, initiates. And instead of going back a few minutes, he goes all the way back to 1988 when he's a 10-year-old boy. back in school. And that's how this first episode ends.
I think one of the strengths of this anime is, like you mentioned earlier, they don't focus on the power. They don't go, oh, well, when I'm in this emotional state and I think really hard, I can go back. Or like Satoru has no idea how this thing works. He just knows it happens to him. And I think that was a big strength for the anime to not dive too much into that, because then you get nerds like Jeremy and I where we're like, oh, well, how long does it work? You know, what kind of power level does he need to be?
What are the limits?
Right. What,
Nope.
what kind of expectations? That was really good that they left that ambiguous.
I actually drew a lot of similarities as I was watching this to ReZero in the manner that in ReZero, you know, he doesn't really have control over it. It takes a lot to exert control over that power that he has. The ultimate sacrifice, one might say. And so in this, it almost came off the same way, where the one time that Satoru actually did use the power, it was just one time. And it was a moment of, you know, intense passion and fear. And so it was okay. I could let that go. I could buy into it. It was completely believable. Yeah.
As I've said many times before, I'm a huge Stephen King fan, and I think his best work is his short stories. I'll tie this in, I promise. The reason being, if you read a novel about a monster or a story, you need an explanation by the end of that novel about why you went into this. But a short story, there can be a tiger in a bathroom, and that's the story, and go with it, and you just go with it. And I kind of felt that way about this because it's such a simple and clean story. Every time I started wondering about revival, I was like, yeah, but that's not the point. You know, the point is about things you let slip by that you wish you hadn't, and getting that chance to do it again. And the power is really just a anime hand wavy thing that you can do in anime to tell that story.
Yeah, this is one of those rare cases where I will agree with you that this hand wavium was actually very, very well done. Yep, very good.
I think one thing that was interesting too, again, from this whole thing being shot from Satoru's point of view was just amazing. To our knowledge, at least that's the implication that was given, that this was his first time going back this far.
Oh, yeah.
And he was so out of his element. He had no idea what to do with it. I mean, yeah, he's basically reliving moments of his past, but now he's like, I'm stuck here. And it happened for like this extended period of time.
Yep.
Yeah, and I did like how he, instead of being like, how do I get back to the present? He's just like, yeah, I'll live my whole life over again if that's what it takes.
Yeah. Well, I think they conditioned us very well because there were those times that he established by saying very clearly, you know, when revival happens, it means that there's a reason I have to go back, something I have to fix in that moment. And so when he went back, you know, right away, he's looking around saying, what's my mission? Well, oh, I know what my mission is. This is a traumatic moment in my life. I got to fix this.
So speaking of that mission, when he goes back, he's going to school, he's re-meeting his friends, and he decides he needs to save the killer's first victim from his hometown. And that is Kaio Hinazuki.
Mm-hmm.
Hinazuki?
Hinazuki. Yeah.
Hinazuki, thank you. And as he's kind of watching her and getting ready for this, he's remembering, how she was abducted, and he's noticing stuff like bruises on her thighs, and he's kind of coming to the awareness that she is a girl being abused by her own parents. So not only is she set up to be this victim of a killer, but she's also a victim of child abuse in her own home, which kind of becomes a secondary antagonist for him to battle, which was, we gave a mature warning when we initially decided to watch this. And this is one of the reasons why it can be very brutal, some of the concepts they're playing with. But the character Kaio, at first, who comes up very stoic and very distant, but warms up as the anime goes on, as you would imagine. So what did you guys think of Kaio?
It did remind me of being back in school watching this, and there was those couple people that were to themselves, and you never knew what they were thinking or what was going on in their lives because they didn't share it with anybody. And not to say this happens to every person that's like that, but many times people close in because something is bad is happening to them and they don't know how to either process it or they don't have the tools to deal with it. Right. And it allowed me to really get myself attached to this character as well. And their portrayal of this little girl, just the character building in this anime is so great. Was great. And I liked her as a character, and she was very believable.
So for me, Hanazuki was the tragic epicenter of this series. Just the things that she had to endure, the way she handled them was really admirable. How tough she was to just keep on trooping along in all of this. Watching her change, like you mentioned, how she warms up. I didn't expect that, actually. I mean, the first time that we really see an interaction between Satoru and Hanazuki is, when he tries to talk to her and she basically kind of tells him off. And it relatively quickly starts to turn a little bit warm, which I was a little surprised. I kind of expected her to be standoffish for a lot longer, but they didn't have a lot of time. Right. And it wasn't it didn't feel unbelievable.
Yeah, it wasn't totally implausible, just because she identifies in him
that he's not who. Too.
Yeah, he's a faker. Because and now he definitely is. He's a 29-year-old pretending to be an 11-year-old, and be able to spot that fakeness in him because she's a little girl pretending to be a student who's actually a victim. And so she bonds over that.
Yeah.
Something just kind of dawned on me. Mm-hmm. Not to go back to the revival again, but it seems to be that he always makes this jump back to a point where he can do something about a tragic event. Him going back to 1988 seems to be a starting point to save his mom.
Right.
I never really thought about that he needed to go back that far.
I didn't either.
To save her life.
Right, because his mom's the kind of woman who's going to get involved,
which makes sense in the context why he never goes back to 29. Well, no.
Yeah, you're right. No, I get you. He doesn't return at the end. Yeah.
Right, because in his other revivals, he doesn't return anywhere either because he only jumps back. Like, so for instance, the very opening scene, he jumps back, tries to wake the guy up, gets in an accident. He doesn't go back forward again.
No, because that would undo his actions.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, this is just dawning on me. Why didn't I catch this?
That's a good observation. I didn't catch it either. It's good.
So I'm gonna go back to Kaya. The thing I loved was and it's gone.
You had an insightful revelation there, Jason.
Yeah, not really.
Troy's mind.
I really enjoyed Kyle and his relationship, and that it wasn't this romantic shipping thing. It was just two kids bonding, and there's a lot to be said, and that's actually something I'm going to come back to when we get to the end, especially when we read his essay, because we have two essays that were read. Hers about the town that continued without me, and about her disappearing, which is a clue he's giving to let him in that she's getting child abused. Mm-hmm. And then his thing, but is that they're just two children bonding over danger and play, and it wasn't romantic, and that was really fresh. Yes. Especially, it kind of would have been weird with a 29-year-old, but I feel like some animes would have gone for it, and I'm really glad they didn't.
It almost feels like a 90s adventure thing, like a kid adventure movie from the 90s.
Yeah, they injected enough humor, especially with these two characters, with her phrase of "What are you, an idiot?" every time he wants to do something or makes a suggestion, and I loved his jokes where he keeps thinking out loud, and I thought it was like a condition of the time travel, but he keeps doing it when he's back 29. He just has this thing where he thinks out loud, and then is like, "Oh no, I said that out loud."
Now, it was weird because I don't remember him ever doing that before he had his first revival back.
He didn't do it before, but he did do it when he was 29 later.
So I think that he actually altered something about himself when he made that jump back and then returned and then jumped back again. Like from the first time he jumped back and he started doing it, I think that became part of his personality. But that was one of my favorite things about him too, was that dual nature and how it's always one that's counseling the other.
So when I talked about the essay, the reason he finds that is he meets all his friends, and one of them, they're all kind of important, but probably the most important is Kenya, who is the blonde-haired, very smart boy who is picking up on what's going on more than anyone else. So what did you guys think of this character?
I really enjoyed him. I was dubious of him at first, just because of tropiness and this kind of character coming on as kind of like the popular. He kind of seemed like the popular kid, but for him to extend that, not just a hand of friendship, but a hand of help, and his sincerity in it. Because you're right, he saw something going on, and Star was like, "Look, I can't fill you in on all the details, but we can be heroes together." And that was a really cool bonding moment to see from that child perspective, because you're so detached from that normal day-to-day activity.
I think Kenya was probably the one piece in this anime that I was not sure about until near the end. That dubiousness you mentioned, Jason, I still had that same dubious sensation until they weren't. Well, probably until around episode 10 or so. Yeah. You know, he came across as this character that I kept expecting to somehow be linked to the villain.
Yeah. What's a smart guy like you doing in a school like this?
Yeah. Well, like let's take, if I can give an example, you have the situation where, you know, we see Satoru talk to the teacher and they talk about birth dates and stuff, and then they leave. And then we see at the very end, we see like the mysterious music is playing and everything. And now Kenya is talking to the teacher, and Kenya's looking down like he's ashamed and his eyes are hooded. And then it cuts out and you're like, okay, what was he talking to the teacher about? Is he sabotaging things?
They never explained that either. I thought that
they do. Back. It was the birthdays, finding out that the birthdays were on the same date so that they'd be able to set up a birthday party for both of them. And
you're right.
That's what it was. But they made it appear so sinister that I was like, Kenya, what are you doing? You know, are you angry because he's, you know, not being loyal to you guys as this friend group, and he's starting to pay so much attention to Kaio? So that was consistent through the whole thing. Even when he was trying to give him help and give him trying to offer his trust and everything, I kept thinking, what is it that you have to gain? It was so strange.
I liked him. I liked his part to play. I actually kind of wished he was doing more. I kept waiting for Satoru to tell someone the full truth and just have someone believe him. But I realized how crazy that would be, so I probably honestly didn't. Because I kind of was, I was with you guys. I'm like, what? He's so standoffish from the rest of his friends, and like, I'm above you guys. And then you find out like he's the one looking out for them all the most. While they're off being kids, he's probably the most mature and being like, okay, guys, we gotta keep an eye on each other. We gotta be there for each other. And what's really interesting is he was like that anyway. And Satoru wasn't the first time he went through his life. Satoru was just a kid trying to pretend to be popular, to get more liked and get through school, which is one of the reasons he's so broken as an adult, is because he was so focused on him. He missed this chance to invite this poor girl to walk home with him, and then left her there in a park, and she ends up getting abducted and died. And he's blamed himself his whole life. And that park, her being alone in that park is his big focus. Like, I can't let her be alone. And that even later extends to other characters when he's trying to protect people. Mm-hmm. But man, there is something. There's a meaning in there for real world watchers, or real life watchers that people should pick up on. Like the people we can help are right there. But the moment to help them is a lightning flash.
So easy to miss.
Right. Which I'll come back to. There's an interesting scene in the third episode where he races another kid on the ice rink, and he's winning, and he decides to slow down for this kid. and he lets this other kid win, who gets pissed at him anyway. And he realizes afterwards, this is exactly what happened last time. And I saw it as a moment of them establishing that time doesn't want to be bent and fixed. It wants to keep going the way it goes, and that if you're not careful, you'll easily fall back into the railroad track you were supposed to be on.
I agree with you. There was a bit leading up to this where, we're told again and again that he doesn't remember all the details, but he's slowly picking up all the memories that, you got to imagine from 29 back to 11, 10 or 11, that's
11-year-old.
Yeah, exactly. So it makes perfect sense why he wouldn't have those memories, but as he's getting them back. So I thought, he's operating at a disadvantage because he doesn't know what path he walked before. He's walking blind through history. Why wouldn't he follow the same steps? So obviously, he does have a 29-year-old in his head telling him, we've got to fix this one moment in time and keeping him focused on that. But it left me wondering from that point on, is he just walking that same path? And there's other moments. I loved this arc that they took us on because there's other moments, when they're in the museum later where the same thing happens. And he's like, oh, crap, this happened before. But then they reveal that, oh, it was a little different. Things have changed. So I loved this.
I took this away as him purposely making sure that the timeline for him getting to the moment where he's going to try and save Kaio is exactly the same, so he can predict where he needs to be. Because if he does change something too drastically, she might not go to the park. She might go somewhere else. At least that's how I took it.
That's interesting. I actually thought initially when the scene started, they were going to be showing us, I have an 11-year-old body, but with a 29-year-old mind, I can do more with it. And I was like, oh, I see what you're doing here.
Yeah,
like I have experience of ice skating. And then, they went a different way. So they're definitely talking about something about timeline, but it's definitely open to interpretation.
And I think that they had that moment, that momentary story as well, where they're basically saying, don't fake just because you think you're going to try and save this ice skater who trains every day, save his reputation. He's more pissed at you because, you could show him up and he knows you could and you chose not to. That's more of an insult. That's like, what would Bakugo do? At that point. We know what he'd do.
You can't mention My Hero Academia. It triggers me.
No.
Tears are coming already.
Satoru then works really hard to try to find out Kaio's birthday because he knows she doesn't reach her birthday. And then he learns out it's on his day. The same day as his birthday. But he finds this out with the help of his teacher. And guys, we warned you in the spoiler warnings, so here it comes. The teacher's the killer.
Yeah, I had like a 95% assurity when I saw the teacher. I was like, that's the guy.
Until the reveal at episode 10, I had no clue.
So when I see a mystery like this, I don't try to solve it as a character. I try to solve it as the writer. And I'm like, well, there's no other male characters around. Yeah. So just in 1988, there was only one male character we're really introduced to, except for the other the guy who was already arrested for the crime.
Right. And we know it wasn't Yuki.
Yeah. So I was like, it's probably him. And actually, there's one moment I'll mention it when we get to it where I didn't think it was him. I was like, oh, I fell for a red herring. But it ends up being this teacher. So let's talk about this twisted serial killer / sensei, Gaku Yashiro. Jeremy, what did you think of him?
He was a really interesting character, a sociopath by every account. It's very, very clear that he is an extremely intelligent person, extremely intelligent. And like you mentioned in the pre-show, I don't think you mentioned in the actual intro, but, he seems to, we find out, have this ability to see like these threads that are on the tops of people's heads. And we get a little narrator description of what that means later on, so we can talk about it then. But he seems to have possibly an ability. And so he's a very interesting character. But honestly, I liked him. I thought he was a very well done villain. I got no problems with him. He would probably be my second pick as favorite character, just purely because of how well they presented him. Like such a well portrayed villain. Yeah,
I 100% agree. I thought unfortunately, he was extremely likable. He was someone that you could get behind, and you were rooting for him when he was helping the kids. And it's like, and then the reveal was really well done. I will say one thing about the strings, though. I think it didn't quite come out why he was killing people with the string. I think it was very similar to the story of some sort of competition for redemption. So like in the story, it was from heaven, the thread was given down, and the character tried to climb up from hell, but then too many people tried to get on behind him, and the thing broke from the weight. I think he was trying for some sort of heavenly redemption, but then in order to get people off the string, he had to kill them.
That's a really interesting way to perceive it. I saw there was a movie I saw a long, long time ago where there was somebody who believed they were being talked to by God, and they went around having to kill people. It was a really popular movie. It had well-known actors, but I can't remember what it was called. I kind of saw it in a similar sense to what you're describing there.
I'm trying to decide if I believe you.
So Tanya told me about it. That's how I found out about it. And then I saw parts of it on television at some point when I just happened to be around what was on. So I haven't even seen the whole thing. But it kind of struck me as similar because, like you say, Jason, it's almost like he's on a quest. You know, the way that they handled this, he was picking specific people because they had these strings. And I thought this was a really interesting way to present it because it meant that he saw the world around him as hell, and these people had a shot at redemption. And so he was just wiping them out and cutting the strings. I didn't actually see him as competing. I know in the last scene they show him having a string, but I never associated them together. And it's snapping like you no longer have to compete. You're lost down here with the rest of them.
Well, like, because in the story, you know, it snaps and he falls back down to hell. I think that's the moment he realized there's no one to compete with anymore because his string is broke.
Yeah, he has no reason to compete because he's got no way out. He's stuck in hell. Yeah,
I really liked 1988 Yashiro.
Well, yeah.
Even the killer, even when he reveals himself as the killer, I thought he was really fascinating and interesting. I loved that they set him up as a father figure for Satoru through this timeline. That he was like, oh gosh, I can really look up to this guy, and everyone really trusts him. And even though I suspected him, Satoru even is like, man, I still feel these feelings for you as a father figure because of how you helped me save a little girl, and yet you're still a psychopath.
You're still the one who wanted to kill her.
Yeah. Even outright said, you filled the void in me in that moment that we saved Kaio.
I felt...
yeah, exactly.
I felt Yashiro in modern times was a little too anime rambly for his reasons. Like, I'm filling the holes of purpose and I do this for reasons. And I'm like, that's really convoluted and doesn't make any sense.
Well, I think you're getting that sense because, you know, try to get a psycho to explain to you why they do the things they do. Like, it's not going to be sensible.
Yeah, to be fair, in 1988 when he explains it, I was on board. Like, sociopath, psycho. He fills a hole. Okay, I'm on board with that. It's just
it's different.
Most of my problems come from that final scene that we'll have to talk about anyway.
So you think, but just like Jeremy said, think about it like this: you've got a dude that's concise. He's got a plan. He's trying to execute it, and he's thwarted time and time and time again. And then he realized who's thwarting him. And then for 15 years, you go through this just mental breakdown year after year. You're going to sound like that
you will babble mindlessly. Because think about it, like, he wanted to kill himself after he thought he killed.
Yeah, I know.
So, like, this relationship that had developed between them, Satoru had actually, he commented on it, and it was it made perfect sense how in this situation, Yashiro had seen him almost as a son, like that hamster that he was shocked that survived in the wine bottle, and so he decided to raise it.
I get that. I completely understand that. It just felt kind of anime-ish.
I'll agree.
I loved it, actually. I thought that it was a really nice touch.
We'll debate it a little more when we get to the scene.
Okay.
Because it's really probably more the scene I have issues with than the character itself. It's just he was kind of the center of that scene.
Gotcha.
So the teacher helps him get the birthday, and then he finds out, it's literally, it's after March 1st and before the birthday, and he finds out, it is March 1st. Luckily, like if she had a birthday on March 30th, that would be a lot harder. But so he knows the specific day she's going to be killed. And he also meets with Yuki and has a conversation with him, just kind of reassuring himself that, this definitely was not the guy.
Yeah.
And then he finds Kaio beaten in her shed of her home. And
that's a rough scene.
It is rough.
I did not expect that. Yeah.
There's more I want to say about that, but I think I want to wait till a different scene. But yeah, it's definitely dawns on you how bad this little girl has it, because up until now we've seen, the bruise and everything. It's been alluded to, but now she's left out in the winter in a shed from being beaten.
And in her nightgown. Like, she's not. Like,
yep.
Yeah.
And then after a scene where she's accused of stealing lunch money at school and he comes to her defense, he takes her up into the mountains to see a Christmas tree, which is just a big tree up on the mountains where you go sledding, and it's covered in ice crystals. It's a really beautifully animated moment. Actually, one thing I would think this anime really did was slow down for these character moments. Even though there's a lot of story to get through, you only got 12 episodes. They had these nice, quiet beats like this that I thought fit perfectly in and really kind of gave you that moment to breathe in between some intense parts.
It was a very necessary pacing. They did a good. I don't think we could have had grounded characters without it.
Right. And so to keep his plan going, he takes her on a date to the science center, and all his friends are like, yeah, we'll totally go. Oh, but we can't. You'll have to take her alone. So he takes her on this date to the science center. And we kind of mentioned it before. He realizes this stuff has been happening before, and he's kind of falling back into the time path, the time loop that he had already been on. But his friends do end up showing up, and he's like, okay, stuff is changing at least a little bit. I did like there's a scene in here where he says, and everyone's like, why would you say that? That's a weird way to phrase stuff, because he's talking with modern language. I actually kind of wish they had a little bit more of that, because that was some of my favorite stuff, especially since he complained about Generation Y language when he was a 29-year-old, and now his language is considered like way too slangy for these kids.
Nope.
He ends up getting her to hang out with him on the day she's going to be murdered and saving her. They end up having a surprise party together the next day. She's completely safe. He even gets up at midnight and checks on her, and everything's fine. Everything's going good. And then the day after his birthday party on the night of 3/2, in the morning of 3/3, he goes to school and she's not there. And this episode was rough to watch because everything's going so well, and it's only episode 4, and it's not going to. There's a couple of spots in this where the dread just fell on me.
Oh yeah,
like a blanket. And this is one of them, because like everything's going so well, and I'm like, oh no, how is this going to go wrong? And here at the end of the episode, she's gone, and you just know, you know the killer got her.
Yeah.
The writers just brilliant writers.
Yeah. They did a phenomenal job of like stabbing you in the chest with a knife and twisting
hooking you in first, hooking you in to safety, and then just
driving it in. Yeah, it was very well done.
So then what he calls the murder loop continues. The same victims are being killed. They're happening at sooner than before. Like everything's off on time wise. And there's a moment where he sees Kaio's mom throw out the mittens she was making him for his birthday. And he freaks out and he starts running and he jumps back to modern times.
Yeah, it's implied that there's more than just mittens in that bag, too, by the way those crows are ripping at it.
Like her body?
There's implication, but then later they say that the body was like sprayed and everything. It's just it's a scene that tries to elicit those emotive responses that you would have associated with a body in a bag, even though the police say that the body is, they've examined it, so we know it's not in the bag. But the way they present the scene, it's to drive at that emotion, at that recognition.
I think it's also misdirection to keep you guessing who the real killer is.
That could be, yeah. It was very effective. Very gross.
Right.
Yes.
He ends up back in his modern time, still running from the cops. He goes to his manager's house, but the cops show up there because the manager called them, because the manager thinks he's guilty. And Katagiri finds him. And she ends up like, dude, you got to turn off your phone. If you're running from the cops, you got to do this right. She helps him.
I've got experience. I know what this is like.
There's a couple of scenes where basically every time things start getting rough, they end up hiding under the same bridge together. And she tells them a story about her father and how through just accidentally being blamed or purposely being, it never really establishes if he was right or wrong, but he was accused of stealing a candy bar and it ruined his entire life.
That was so flimsy, but yes.
I don't know Japanese culture well enough to know how flimsy it is. That was my in Japanese culture. Would something like that be so offensive to someone you do business with that in a small community? Would that completely ruin you? You're
right. I hadn't considered that. It is very cultural. That's possible.
It's
flimsy here.
In my mind, I agree. I was like, a candy bar? Really? You could just be like, my kid did it.
yeah, exactly.
I actually thought that was going to be the thing. She was like, I actually was the one who took the candy bar.
She just doesn't want to admit it.
Right. She, after confronting the manager and a stranger who's at the pizzeria asking about what's going on, she goes back to her place and gets a text message from Satoru's mom, who is dead at this point, and realizes, the killer is texting me, and then her house is lit on fire. And Satoru gets to the house, and he rushes in to save her, and she ends up being saved, but she gives him her phone so he can see that text happened. And that's when he decides, I need help. And he goes to another journalist that used to work with his mom, which is the same one his mom had called. And that's where we get kind of our expo dump on the new murder facts from this guy, because he's been investigating this case for a very long time. And he has a list of suspects that Satoru gets to see. And he's like, okay, I got to figure out who on this list it was. And he goes through a bunch of different case files. And we learn about like how Kaio was killed, that she was left out in the shed after being beaten again and then sprayed with a chemical that froze her faster, so she actually died. And once again, what's his name got blamed?
Yuki.
Yuki. Yeah, Jun. He was Satoru always called him Yuki, but his real name is Jun. And then he ends up meeting the girl underneath the bridge again, who tells him about that stranger. Is like, his name was Nishizono, and he's like, oh, that's not one of the names on the list. So that doesn't really add up. And then the cops show up and arrest him. And as he's being arrested, he looks over and he sees the killer.
Yep. And the killer's always conveniently got his head tilted down, and his fedora or hat of some kind is covering everything but like just enough of his face to see his smile and his red eye sometimes.
It was kind of strange. I guess I know why the killer would be there.
Oh, he's savoring it.
No, I get why the killer would want to be there.
Yeah.
Why are the cops okay with the killer being there? Why is that character? Because he's a
like
councilman. Do councilmen really show up to major arrest? Is that normal?
if the cops are paid, and I mean, what I got was an implication that he's basically got things in his pocket. The whole reason why he wound up in that position was because he had plans, goals to get there. So I think he's been working his way up.
So
I really did like this episode because of the whole, hey, I need to find out more about, the episode before 5. I need to find out more about what happened. So, because he knows he's going to go back, or at least he has a feeling he's going to go back. He just doesn't know how or when or what the mechanism for it is. But I did love that, okay, I need to just dig in. What are the new facts? What are the, now I have a list of suspects.
So I was under the impression he was committed to fighting it here, that he wasn't going back, that he was like, okay, I've been blamed, and it's either now me or him. I got to either find him or I'm going down. I think he said that at one point. He's like, it's either him or it's me at this point. I'm either going to get caught or I'm going to catch him.
Okay.
Yeah, I got that. I got that impression because I took this as, well, he failed at revival. Like, he came back and nothing changed. He failed. Ooh, this is bad.
Technically, the dates change. He does find out he did manage to change the dates.
That's true.
Which is just kind of an establishment that he can actually change the past. That when he comes back to the present, it isn't like an alternate timeline he created or anything like that.
Yeah.
So when he's being arrested, he basically begs God or himself to revival, and he does, back to 1988. Starting at the Science Center when he went on the date with Kaio. This time he lets Kenya in on, like, look, there's a murderer, and it's going to happen to Kaio. Everyone else is watching him do all this stuff and thinks he's trying to stop child abuse, which is great in its own right, but he's like got extra game that he's playing. He's got 2 opponents he's playing this game against because he also has to protect her from the abusive mom. So the first thing he does is he vandalizes Yuki's house, so the cops will be there the night of the murder.
that was really good. Yeah.
And then after the birthday party, when he's walking her home, he asked if he can abduct her. And this is so the killer can't find her. And he gets Kenya to help, and his friends all help, and they take her out to this old rickety bus, and they build her like a little shelter in it to hide in. And then basically the plan is wait till the mom calls the cops, and then it'll get the mom busted for being a child abuser because she'll wait too long, and because the mom does not. She's already been hiding from social services this whole time. Like, they show up at her door, she sprints out the back, that kind of stuff. So he's trying to get her busted while also keeping Kaio off the grid until the killer has disappeared. I really like the scenes that we have with Kaio and him and the friends at the bus. I like how the friends got involved, and this is someone had mentioned earlier that this has felt like the Goonies or that 80s 90s adventure of Steven Spielberg kind of thing, where young kids battling forces of evil way beyond their comprehension, but because they have the power of their friendship. And I don't mean that in a normal anime way.
No,
because it's not expressed in this anime like that at all.
No. But yeah, that's definitely the sense I was getting. The episode 7 ends on a very intense note where someone comes into the bus.
Well, so before that is actually one of the most conflicting scenes I think I've ever seen in anime, and it's Satoru tracks Akame, and
the mom, the evil mom.
He's literally about to push her down the stairs. And I'm going, do it. Don't do it. Oh my gosh. What do I do? Oh, you're going to, oh no.
Yeah.
I haven't had that kind of emotional response to a scene in anime in a long time.
Yeah.
So my reaction was, I didn't even realize that's how far he was willing to go at that moment till after the scene had passed. I was like, oh, you were gonna kill her.
Yeah.
And that's where his frame of mind is. He's like, I'm all in on saving this no matter the cost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It kind of takes you back to the very first thing that she said when he talked to her, Kaio, that is she said, would you be my friend? Would you kill someone for me? That's the first thing she said to him. And he said,
that's right.
No, I wouldn't do that. Well, now we're seeing that play out where he's like, I think I will, because it's either you or her. I think I will. Yeah. Of course, Kenya shows up and stops him, which was interesting.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That scene went by, and I was like, "Wait, what? What?
Yep.
And then back to the bus scene. So the next episode starts with this person searching the bus, and they leave. I was kind of unhappy that Kaio didn't mention this like immediately. Should be thing number one, because she sees them before. She sees him before, and he goes to school afterwards. And then when they come back, she mentions it. And then they search the bus, and they realize, he especially realizes, oh, this is the killer's hideout. Like all these boxes, the backpack that was left here has the killer's gear in it. It's like, oh, we gotta go, guys. We gotta go.
This is not a good place to be.
And so he takes her to his house. And this is really where I fell in love with the mom. She's already making extra food because she knows. She's like, oh, you could say she's a bad parent for letting her son handle child abuse case on his own.
Right.
She has, I don't want to sound like a faulty record. Like, what's the term? I'm on repeat. But she's an awesome character and it's such an interesting character because of that same thing where she's a fascinating character. That's what I said before. So yeah, she's a fascinating character because obviously she trusts her son so implicitly. Like she knows. And yet there's this moment where she's like, you're not going to do anything bad, are you? And he's like, no, of course I'm not. And she's like, right, I know you're not. How silly of me. Go on, go do your thing. Right. And like you say, there's all these signs that she knows exactly what's going on and she's just waiting for a situation. It's almost too perfect, and yet it doesn't leave the bounds of believability. Right? Yeah. It's really good.
Like I said, she invites everyone in, she feeds everyone dinner, and then lets Kaio stay the night, bathes her, washes her hair, basically gives Kaio a taste of the life she never got to have, like a real mom, being a real mom. There's a great scene where they all sleep in the familial bed, I guess, because they have a small apartment, so they all share a bed, and the mom lays between us. I think we already mentioned it.
No, that was in the pre-show, I think.
Was that in the pre-show? Am I getting in the way? And he blurts out, yeah.
So she whacks him. This was actually really interesting because I mentioned it to Tanya, and she goes, oh yeah, didn't you know that's actually the customary place? After the Japanese wife would have a child, she would actually go and sleep in the room with the children. She would no longer sleep with her husband until the children were grown up. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
The scene after that, though, is probably the most emotional I've been since we started this podcast. Maybe Deku doing some cool stuff. She gets up in the morning and there's a full breakfast there. Eggs, toast, bean, whatever they make. And she starts weeping as she's thinking about like every morning waking up to a stale piece of bread and like 2 coins to buy her lunch. And
yeah. She
and
never got both.
She starts crying. And the scene started and I was watching her cry and I was like, yeah, that is sad. And then I was like thinking about why she's crying. And it's the realization of everything you've lost, everything that has been taken away from you, everything every child deserves to have that she never was given. And as a parent, that wrecked me. I teared up at this moment. It hit me harder than I thought it would. Because like I said, the scene started. She started crying. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And that, just as the wheels were spinning in my head about the motivations behind that, what's she thinking of? As a parent, that's so devastating.
Because there's even scenes of Akemi like holding her head underwater, like waterboarding her own kid.
Yeah, her mother doing that to her.
Ice water to make the bruises go down.
Right.
Yeah.
And just to see, like, because to just imply she's being abused is one thing. Like, that's horrible enough. But then to, like, show these, like, cover-ups that she's doing was pretty heart-wrenching. Like, it just made me abhor this woman even more.
Yeah, and it actually gets even worse when it doesn't have anything to do with the child abuse, but just the way that she handles being found out. Like, just the whole.
Which is what happens next. We go to Kaio's mother, and she's in a rage that her daughter's still missing, but she's not calling anybody. And Kaio rings the doorbell, and she rushes outside to hit her. and Satoru and his mom are out there with her, and they get her to come out, and she attacks the mom with the shovel. Like, she pulls out a snow shovel and swings at her. I kind of wanted Satoru. It wouldn't have fit this anime, but I wanted her to do the anime block it with like one finger, just go Super Saiyan on her. I would have been okay with that moment.
You know, we almost did have a little bit of that earlier, because there was a scene early on where Kaio's mother was going to hit Satoru.
Catches her wrist out of nowhere.
Yeah. So you kind of got your moment, but yeah, this was.
But she did get the anime blood down the forehead.
Yeah,
she just like wipes away. I don't care.
Yep.
When she's about to go further, she realizes child services is also standing right there with the teacher who helped. Yoshiro helped set this all up. He's the one who's been orchestrating child services this whole time, so he's been involved and he helps with this. And they have Kaio's grandmother, her mom's mom, there. And we're giving the reason of why Kaio is being beaten by her mother. So what I wanted to say earlier is, when I first saw how they were handling this, well, I don't know much about child abuse. I don't know anyone who was child abused. I wouldn't be myself. I treat my kids great. I kind of felt it was cartoony. And what I mean by that is, like, every Saturday I beat my kid and I'm happy about it. Like, I guess I see child abuse as like, I beat my kid, but then I feel bad afterwards, but I fly into a rage, or I'm in a drunken alcoholic state and I hit my kid, but then I tell myself it's not my fault, and I apologize to them. And this mom seemed gleeful about the fact that she was beating her daughter, which felt weird to me at first. But then when we get the grandma in, she talks about how I made you divorce that man, and we get a flashback of Kaio's father hitting Kaio's mom and how she was abused by him and then divorced him and then left on her own. And so what I took it as is that she is getting her power back, her revenge on this man who hit her by hitting what was left of him, the daughter they created. And that made that sadisticness fit where it hadn't before.
Yeah. Actually, I have to say, just because I do have some experience with people who have gone through physical child abuse, like being the child. And I know the people that actually did the abusing. And so I know I've seen some of the behaviors and everything. And now I can assure you they at least hit that character pretty spot on from the people that I've experienced. Yeah. There's this sense of, well, it could have been so much worse. You should just be happy that it wasn't as bad as it could have been. Yeah. And so, yeah, no, they hit it pretty close to what I've seen. It's really, really, they are cartoony, because it's so hard to believe that people can be like that.
Yeah, a person could do that. That makes sense. Mm-hmm. So Kaio is taken away with her grandmother to go live, and she's so happy to go. And Satoru is, looking up at his teacher like, man, you're the hero who came in and saved the day. Yeah. And then he immediately starts on his next mission, which is the second victim, and how to save her. And it's a girl named Aya, who's not in his school, but in the school nearby or across the street or something like that. And so he's like trying to figure out, how am I going to get close to this girl when I don't have the in of being her classmate? She's just some random girl I pass on the street. So he starts following her around and trying to learn her schedule. And one time when he's following her, his mom sees him and is like, hey, help me with the groceries. And the teacher shows up and is like, hey, I will give you guys a ride home with all your groceries. And they're like, oh, great. Mom falls asleep in the backseat, and he is asking the teacher for advice. How do I get close to this girl? And he's like, hey, there's something sticking out of your glove compartment. And all these lollipops fall.
I thought this was going to be like the big reveal moment, because the mom's disabled. Yeah, you thought that too? Yeah, and I loved the way like everything here played out. Because, I mean, go ahead and finish describing the scene.
So yeah, he opens up and all these candy comes out, and it's actually building up as a drama moment. And then the teacher reaches over, grabs it, and is like, I used to smoke and these help. And then
such absolute
and throws like 5 of them in his mouth, gives one to Satoru, and then the mom wakes up and is like, I want one too. For me, so I had suspected the teacher from the moment we saw him, because lack of other suspects.
Right.
This is the moment, because the reveal didn't happen. I'm like, did I get red herringed on the teacher?
Yeah, I thought the same thing.
Because I'm like, oh, that's so incriminating. That's exactly what a killer would have. And then they have an explanation and everyone's okay with it. I'm like, was that just supposed to be a fake out? Did I fall for the fake out the whole time? This is the one time I doubted that the teacher was the killer the whole time.
So
which is the most incriminating moment, really.
I didn't think he was the killer, like I said, until the big reveal. But this moment made me question if he was. And then, like you said, everyone was okay with the explanation, even the mom. And because I put so much trust and faith in the mom, I was like, oh, okay, well, maybe this was just a weird moment. Writers playing with me. But yeah, looking back on it now, I'm like, even though he had like this smile on his face as Kaio was driving away, and now he's helping Satoru at the groceries, like what must be going through his head is like, how is this kid doing this?
Yes.
Yeah, which we find out that we see flashbacks later of like right before these scenes that we're describing of the teacher like just furious, like, how is he always here? How is he always keeping these kids safe?
Yeah. I mean, they actually show the teacher. They show Yashiro's eyes as I'm having such a hard time with these names. As Satoru was reaching for the glove box, and his eyes were sincere. And I realize it's just a cartoon, but they drew his eyes sincere.
Yes.
No,
like I've been caught.
Yeah, and so then when he came up with that excuse, I'm like, you are such a smart man. You are so smart that I don't buy this for one moment. No.
So
very well done.
After this, he tells all his friends, like, hey, look, there's a killer out there, and he's going to target a kid. And he's like, we got to protect Aya, and we got to protect you, Hiromi, who is this boy who's with their group who looks kind of like a girl. He's like the most effeminate of them. And they explained the reason Hiromi gets killed was to throw off the scent of the MO.
So evil.
But that the killer does later. I also kind of thought it was interesting because he hasn't mentioned to Hiromi once, like, hey, be safe.
Right. Like, I think it's entirely because Hiromi is in the group. And so he's like, yeah, I'm just making sure that, they're always someone is always with Hiromi.
Right. But it wasn't until this point he's even focused on Hiromi. I know he was highly focused in on saving Kaio. She's the first domino to fall, save her. It just felt like he could have just said, hey, Hiromi, by the way, don't walk home alone ever.
Yeah.
Or me.
Especially since he should have considered that, if you put a kink or a crimp in the
the timeline could change.
The timeline could change. He already established that. You're right. He should have done something.
And he's mentioned that a couple times. Like, I wonder if he's going to go after someone else. Like, you should tell people.
Yeah, tell the people that are his potentials.
But basically, he comes up with this plan of like, let's always all be together. These kids that are always loners, we need to keep them together, and we should always be in pairs. We should always be in groups. And there's a great scene of I think his name is Kazu, who's like the bigger boy of their friend group. And he goes up to Aya and he's like, we have a hideout because we're manly men. And then they end up liking each other.
I loved that.
I did. I really like that.
I didn't see it coming at all.
Those characters don't get a lot of time. We don't know them very well, but it was a nice moment in the anime.
Yeah.
After, he's like, okay, I got everyone safe. Everything's good. Someone mentions to him, hey, that girl that everyone's been mad at since the stolen money incident, because we all think she's the one who did it. She's been alone every day for a while. And he's like, oh no, I've got to take care of this. So he follows her to an ice skating practice and tracks her to a bathroom. And when she goes into the bathroom, the teacher comes around the corner. He's like, hey, what are you doing? Like, I'm looking for this girl. He's like, well, she went outside. And they go outside, and the Yuki's father's delivery truck is out there, and he's like, "Oh gosh, it was Yuki's father." And the teacher's like, "Okay, get in my car. I'll go after him." This is where the big reveal happens. He helps him buckle his seatbelt, which is not able to come unbuckled. And as they're driving, Satoru's like, "I'm gonna get a popsicle again," and there's no popsicles, and he's like, "Yeah, this isn't my car."
Yep.
This is great. The big reveal is a great scene of the teacher being like, I don't know how you're doing it. I don't know how you're messing with my life, man, but I respect you as an opponent.
They go on a long drive.
Yeah,
Like it's not just
to
hey,
the
I'm going
woods.
to take you around the corner and then off you. Like yeah, this is a long drive where like they
Which
they know.
okay, so that actually brings up a question. We keep talking about this scene too, but so he takes him out to this lake and he drives pushes the car down to the lake and leaves him to drown. But he doesn't die. Did the killer fish him out?
Yes.
I was left with that assumption. I mean, it's purely an assumption.
Yeah.
I think so.
Well, he mentions it in the final dialogue that he's like, I couldn't kill you because of what you said. And I waited 15 years for you to tell me how you knew my future. Because that's exactly what he does. It's like as the car hits the water, he yells out to him. He goes, "I know your future," and it wigs him out so much. Yeah, he fished him out of the water.
We had
no one
talked
else was around to do it.
Yeah, it makes sense.
We had talked
Plus-
about dread in this anime, and this is the most dread I felt the whole time. Like just that knowing he's a helpless 11-year-old boy stuck in a car with a killer, and there was no escape, and there wasn't, and it's just oh my goodness.
I think this was right around the time you texted me like, "How did you stop watching this anime?"
Yeah.
Yeah, this ends with him drowning. He's in the water, and it's like credits. I'm like, who would stop there? So I had another day to finish watching this. I had planned on the Friday before the day before we recorded. We record on Saturdays. I was going to finish on Friday. I was watching this Thursday night. I was like, I can't. I have to finish now.
That's when you. Yeah, I saw that. I saw that post.
The final 2 episodes, in my opinion, dropped the ball a little bit.
How so?
Well, let's talk about what happens, and then we'll do it. So, we get a narration from the killer about hamsters he drowned as a little boy, and one hamster surviving, and him taking that hamster and raising it, and how it kind of inspired his killings, because it's about. So this is where I get upset. Like it's about finding the survivors, the strugglers. But like you said, it could make sense that he's removing the ones who could pull his string, snap his string, right?
That's what I'm under the impression of, or at least my theory on why he's killing, because he's trying to knock those people, or at least knock others on the string off so his doesn't break, so he can make it to heaven.
That's actually the first logical explanation that I've heard. So, I mean, as far as like trying to come up with some explanation for this, because I kept going over it as I was watching, it was a little bit cumbersome. Like you mentioned, I still think that he's a crazy person. I don't think he's actually seeing strings. I don't think he has an ability. I think it's an interesting idea for him to have an ability, but I think he's just a psycho. And
I agree.
Yeah. And so whoever he, decides he wants to kill, a string appears on their head, and so it's.
I don't know if he has control over whether he sees a string on someone's head or not, but I don't think it's real. I do think it's psychosis. I think.
Okay, so we're not there yet, but I want to explain. So there's a scene where we, the audience, are shown just Satoru sitting. He's talking to the killer, and they're on the roof that we're going to get to. But it's our viewpoint on Satoru, and you can see the string coming off his head. And yeah, I know there's another scene where the killer sees the string come off his own head, and I could say, okay, that's psychosis. But why are we seeing a string on Satoru when he's talking?
Because we're seeing it through the eyes of the killer.
Are we? Because I felt like we weren't. I felt like we were still seeing it through the eyes of Satoru, and the string was there. That's why I'm wondering if the string was there. And that's a very flimsy proof or any evidence. I get that. That was just the kind of thing that kind of started the theory in my head that maybe there are more than one person with powers in this world, and that he was already a crazy person, but then he starts seeing these strings, and he's like, I need to experiment with killing these people and figure out what this is.
I would have to rewatch it before giving a better answer, but it felt like Satoru was talking to the killer and we were seeing that conversation through the killer's eyes. But that's just the way I took it.
All right, so let's just wrap up the story then, and then we can argue all we want.
Okay.
After the hamster story, we get Satoru waking up after being cared for. Well, he wasn't cared for by his mother the whole time, just the past 3 months. But his mother sees him wake up because we get a scene of someone else caring for him over the 15 years.
What?
So he wasn't in his mother's house the whole time.
I thought he was.
Not the whole time, because he's in and out.
There's a scene of Yoshiro shaving him in the hospital.
Yeah,
So
which is in the hospital, but you're right.
But anyway, he's with Sachiko in her house, and he wakes up, and we find out she's been taking care of him, especially for the past 3 months, helping him with his muscles and training. But I thought they were going to be like, oh, so now you can walk. Your mom took care of you. And I'm glad they didn't. It was still like, no, you're still messed up, but you'll be able to walk again someday because your mom was a good person. When he wakes up, he cannot remember what happened. His memories are all jumbled. He actually believes he is the 11-year-old boy woken up, 18 years later.
Actually, you make a good point, because Satoru's mom did not have an expectation of him ever waking up. She hoped he would, but she was working his muscles every day on someone that may never have woken up. That is the definition of a super mom right there.
Well, yeah, because the job that she had for herself was working in a they kept showing this, that she was working
store?
Yeah. And
yeah.
She was an investigative reporter. She had a high paying job. She had enough money to come up with, not just their rent, but also great meals all the time, 3 times a day and everything. So what could possibly have taken up so much of her attention and time that she would have to shift out of such a demanding job? I kind of got the impression that because also, why would she only when there's just 3 months from the time he's going to wake up? How did she know he was going to wake up in 3 months? I don't know. I think she was taking care of him the whole time. And I think that
or at least an extended period of time.
I thought they said something about like 3 months ago, your mom started caring for you again, or and moved you out. But we see scenes of him being pushed in a wheelchair by a nurse out on the hospital grounds. We see a scene of the killer shaving him with no mom around.
Yeah,
he was definitely in the hospital for a very long time without her.
I think that was checkups. I think it was like, because sometimes they do have to stay.
The killer just showed up for checkups and shaved him.
The killer is like the dean of the hospital or whatever. So
do you think the mom is letting the old teacher shave her son though? That's just seemed like
totally.
I don't think she knew he was there.
Yeah, I think she just figures that the hospital staff did it. Whatever staff.
Okay. Well, either way, he wakes up. He has no memories. It's Kenya and Hiromi come and visit him. Kayo comes and visits him with her baby that she had with Hiromi.
Did not see this coming.
I was super happy about it though. I was like, cool. Good for you guys.
Yeah.
And Satoru felt the same way, which was nice.
Yeah.
Not she moved on without me. She doesn't love me. Like, they could have easily gone into that garbage, and I'm so happy that they didn't.
Yep.
In these scenes, we start seeing a little girl whose name is Kumi, and she's a little girl with leukemia who's being treated at the same hospital. And she's kind of being befriended by Satoru. And then this guy comes, and he's like, hey, I'm Nishizomo, who was the mysterious guy from the pizza place. And then he's like, I'm Yoshiro, your teacher, but I changed my name because I got married to a wealthy family. And now I'm a politician, a low-level politician. And he's like, oh, hi, teacher. And basically, over the next couple of months, or weeks or whatever, while he's doing therapy, he's visiting his friends, he's visiting with his old teacher. He does not know what's going on. What's really great about this episode is that there's the little boy voice actor is narrating now instead of the older man narrator. That was such a cool detail. I loved it so much.
Actually, it was my favorite part of this whole anime was he was grappling with this issue. He was like, okay, they've used all these weird technical terms and like advanced vocabulary that I understand, but I don't remember ever learning them.
Yeah, he's drawing like really good manga art
Yeah. Like how do I have all these skills and I know all these things, but I'm supposed to be 11 mentally?
Yep.
The big showdown comes down on the day of this girl's big surgery. He goes to see her, and his teacher shows up. He's like, "Oh yeah, she's already asleep. Don't worry about it. I already talked to her. Let's go talk, you and me, more private." Basically, takes him out to the roof, and when he gets to the roof, Satoru looks at him and is like, "Yeah, teacher. By the way, I've had my memories." And we find out from the moment he met Kaio's daughter, his memories have fallen back into place, and this whole time he's been faking. And he's let some of his friends and his mother in on the secret that he
Actually,
did have
mom figured it out. Didn't even have to tell her.
Yep.
Didn't Kenya figure it out too?
I think he did.
You have your memories, don't you? Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, because he wasn't going to tell Kenya. He was like, "I'm going to take care of this alone." And Kenya's like, "Don't. Remember how that worked out last time?" He's like, "Yeah, but guys, I don't want to burden you." He's like, "Hiromi became a doctor because of you."
Yeah.
I'm a lawyer. Like, we're good. Don't worry about it. So it comes down to this big showdown on the roof where basically the killer's like, "Hey, tell me how you knew the future." I waited 15 years to find out. And then he's like, "Okay, fine. You're not going to tell me. I'll just kill you anyway. I don't care. You were BSing. I'm sure of it now." And he's like, No. Was I BSing? I was not. You're not going to kill me. You've never been able to kill me. You could have killed me this whole time. And then Satoru drives his wheelchair off the roof of the hospital, and the killer grabs him and is like, "No, what are you doing?" He's like, "Oh, you're saving me? What's that about? Maybe you need me?"
Yeah, I told you can't live without me.
I'm removing the drama from it. To be fair, highly. So guys, help! This is the moment I was kind of like, really. Because, in my opinion, this is not a bad ending. It was an unsatisfying ending for a child killer. I wanted this guy to fall into a pit of razor blades and catch on fire.
So, to be clear, just a question. Was Kaio supposed to be his very first victim, or was it his first victim in this
No, because
town?
they did mention there have already been killings.
Yeah.
Okay, so he is a killer that's just never been
And
caught.
he points out the statute of limitations is up on all the killings I actually committed, and I haven't murdered since the day I tried to murder you.
Right.
Which again, I kind of have an issue with it. That's not very satisfying because he's like, "Hey, you can't get me." So basically what happens is he's like, "You're right. I can't live without you." And he lets him fall. And he's like, "Okay, now I'm going to commit suicide." And right before he commits suicide and jumps off the hospital, he looks down and Satoru has fallen into a cushion made by all his friends and family who were there to catch him. And he's like, "Oh crap, everyone just saw me let this guy fall." Right? So they get him on attempted murder. Now, I guess they probably got him on attempted murder of the little girl and not Satoru, but maybe Satoru.
Or maybe both counts.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But does letting someone who threw themselves off a building fall count as attempted murder? Because he technically didn't attempt to murder him. He just couldn't save him.
Well, it depends on
could
how
have
clear it
saved
was
him.
that he could have.
Yeah,
Like,
he could
how
have saved him.
clear could they see that he wasn't tired and that he deliberately let go?
So you guys both really love this ending, and like I said, I don't think it's a bad ending. I don't think it was a satisfying ending, and it's not the manga ending. I should point out. I did a little research. My daughter, who had watched Erased before, got to the same point Jason did, and then apparently there was a break or something, so she went and finished the manga ending. So I actually sat down with her and talked about the differences and stuff. And so I'm not going to spoil them here, but I just want to say
You prefer the manga ending.
The manga ending was, I'll say this, he didn't quit killing. And so there was much more mystery and finding proof that goes into catching him in the manga ending, whereas this, it was just kind of like, well, we got him on what we could get him.
Yeah. I liked it because I thought that it was a very elegant way to handle this interesting situation. Again, it comes down to what was happening during these 15 years that he was locked up. And in the anime, you know, they're stuck with such a short window with just 12 episodes in a season, and they wanted to wrap it up. So I think that with that choice that they made, I think it was handled very well because I could see that sort of relationship developing. I mean, 15 years, he took away this impetus of him killing other children because there was a problem. You know, he'd met a hurdle, an unsolved issue, And so he had to sit here and just deal with that. And over time, I took it as he was mentally broken because of this period of time. And then I don't even know if it was exactly 15 years, but from this period of time, combined with the things that, the fact that Satoru was actually, the things he was saying were so clear, they were so correct, they were so spot on that when Satoru woke up and started saying these things to him on the roof, I think that it essentially, it broke him. Like if the only thing left for him to do, one of the things that I've read about suicide specifically is that a lot of times people that are committing suicide are simply lashing out at the only thing they can. If they could murder, they would, but they can't. So they turn it inward and they kill themselves because that's a way to get that attention. It's just one of the things I've read in psychology. Not saying that's the case, but I see that in the way this character ended, to actually kill this last time and then say, I can't do anything anymore. I'm going to kill myself. It was just another murder. So he was broken both mentally and then by the law. I was actually okay with it. It was satisfying to me.
So the problem I have is that means Satoru's ultimate plan to beat the ultimate villain of this anime was, don't worry guys, I'm going to blow his mind.
It doesn't have to be intentional.
Think about it.
No, this is all planned. This whole thing was planned, and he went up there to convince him, "You're not going to kill me." Fake suicide.
I only got part of it. I mean, I understand what you're saying because of the gate and because they had to have time to set up. So clearly, they had it as a plan.
He was clearly jumping off that roof.
But how did he know they were going to the roof? Okay, the whole thing unravels at that point, I think, because there's lots of places that Yashiro could have taken him. So how did they know to set that up?
Well, he did have the cell phone open, but...
Well, and also somehow they knew he was going to sabotage the IV as well.
Right, because they do stop her death before the surgery happens.
So. Well, I could the IV thing being because they heard it and then immediately were like on task because Kenya threw the phone. But like, how did they know to have that gate open? How did they have this signal of like, where the gate?
How did they even open the gate from the ground?
Well, I'm assuming that the gate would have already been open,
and which means the wind was pushing it further or something.
Well, yeah, I think that was just for us so that we understood it was open.
Okay, I can see that.
I take it from a little different standpoint. The reason I was okay with it is, usually you want to see someone brought to some sort of justice, and obviously, Jalen for a maximum of 2 attempted murders is not that long, for the killings that he did. The reason it was fairly satisfying for me is Satoru literally broke this person in a way that prison never could have. Would it have been more satisfying if he had just jumped off and killed himself? Maybe. But you're talking about this eternal torment for the rest of this guy's life. I guess it's not eternal because he's going to die someday, but he's literally a broken man, and we see it in the ending shots of the anime. He's driving a pizza delivery truck, like he's.
No, that's not him. That's the manager of the pizza place.
Was it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So he's in jail.
Yeah, he's in jail.
He stopped him from killing for 15 years. He then brought him to the point of suicide. This dude's a broken man.
I don't disagree with anything you're saying. That's all true. I just didn't find it satisfying to be like, I don't understand time travel. My give up. I know it's more complex than that, but that's what keeps coming back to me. That's an oversimplification. I'm not getting my satisfaction from it. I just feel like the killer gave up because of the mental games that what Satoru did to him.
What would you have rather seen him?
I already said, fall into a pit of razor blades, catch on fire, and then a nuclear bomb just. Oh, wait, probably not in Japan. That's probably horrible. Sorry.
Yeah, nice choice of words.
Yeah, that was wonderful.
I don't know. I see him being more pulverized. If you break somebody mentally and then, basically remove their ability to kill anymore, That's the one thing he had that gave him the most pleasure. I don't know. That was extremely effective.
The plan is like, don't worry, guys, I'm going to break him mentally. And everyone's like, that's cool. That's a good plan.
No, I don't think that was the plan.
This was all a plot to catch him and get him in jail.
I totally agree.
I saw that whole ending sequence as their plan to get
So he just got lucky that he did break his mind? Like, that
was a side effect.
Yeah, I think it was a side effect. I think it was Satoru's gambit.
We gotta go to final reviews. Some of us have bedtimes coming up.
Okay.
Jeremy, how about you go first?
So I absolutely loved this story. It was very well put together. The characters were all fascinating. There were lots of facets to deal with. I think the only character that, like we said, wasn't a shining star in this was Kairi. And I mean, we didn't even talk about the fact that at the end, Kairi shows back up because he waits underneath the bridge.
I'll mention that in my final review. I'll mention another part of the epilogue. Because, there's an epilogue. Basically, everyone lives happily ever after. He becomes a famous manga artist.
Exactly. And so I really enjoyed it there. Even though they were following, some things were predictable, like who the villain was, to me, was predictable. It was still really satisfying the way that they revealed things to the audience, the way that they presented things. Everything was very well done. I want to give this 5 Bakas.
Okay. Jason, how about you?
I'm going to mirror exactly a lot of what Jeremy said. I want to give it 5 Bakas as well. Concise story, great closure, great characters, amazing characters, and development of the relationships and how the story was told was refreshing. Definitely put on your playlist.
So for me, while I don't think they quite stuck the landing, in my opinion, which would bring it down, I'm going to bring it back up because there's a moment here in the epilogue that I haven't mentioned yet, where he goes back to his hometown and he reads his essay from when he was 10 years old. And when he started reading it, I was like, this is boring. Like I want my resolution. I want more of these characters being friends and seeing them. I want my epilogue to be my epilogue. But I started thinking about what he was saying. He's talking about his favorite anime hero and what heroes have to go through. And I realized that there's another layer to this entire anime and the theme wise, and I've kind of already touched on a little bit, that it's about real world heroes and being a hero in the real world. And it's telling it to people through a medium where a lot of myself included, viewers are, I want to be a Super Saiyan who saves the world. I want to be a Shinigami who saves my friends. I want to be a Shinobi who protects the village. And they're saying there's another way. There's a real way to be a hero, and heroes are needed in this world. And it's asking someone to walk home with you when they need it. It's being there for the people who are in trouble. It's saying something when you see something bad.
And not pushing a mom down the stairs.
Yes.
Unless it's really, really important to save someone's life.
in my opinion, that was the message of Erase. It was, this is what it is about, being a hero and not the hero we're used to seeing in anime who gets up through willpower and battles their way out. It's making those connections and helping people that need it. And that was really beautiful. So I'm giving this 5 Bakas because that layer right there just put it in the sky for me.
Very well said.
And we have our second unanimous 5 Bakas. It only took us another year.
and this was an anime I thought was going to be our second one in our podcast. So for our next anime, we are watching the first 12 episodes of Recreators. This is picked by Jason. It is an anime about anime and video game and manga characters coming into the real world. So kind of the opposite of what's happening with like ReZero, where people are going into fantastical worlds. This is fantastical people coming into a real world, and it is it hasn't even finished yet. But by the time we get to the end, it will have finished, and we're just doing the first 12 episodes. So
going from tropeless to full of tropes.
Yeah. So we'll see how that goes. Guys, if you have thoughts about what we've talked about tonight, a lot of heavy stuff, but really good anime, we'd love to hear them. You can reach us on Twitter at Baka Podcast. You can send us an email, the anime baka club at gmail.com, or send us a comment wherever you found this podcast and it'll get to us. And that will end it for us.
Thanks for listening.
Revival.
Sayonara.